It was one of those stiflingly hot summer nights in Ohio, the kind where the air feels thick enough to swim through. My name's Alex Parker, a 30-year-old graphic designer who's more comfortable behind a computer screen than facing anything remotely supernatural. My roommate, Dave Mitchell, a rugged outdoorsman and all-around carefree spirit, had left for a weekend camping trip in the Appalachian Mountains. With the house to myself, I thought it'd be the perfect opportunity to unwind. I poured a generous glass of whiskey, sank into the well-worn couch, and queued up my favorite sci-fi series. The air conditioning was struggling against the oppressive heat, barely making a dent in the humidity. Around 9 p.m., just as the show's plot was hitting a crescendo, everything went black. Power outages were a common nuisance in our aging neighborhood, especially during heat waves. I sighed, more irritated than concerned, and fumbled for the box of matches we kept on the coffee table. Lighting a couple of candles, I checked my phone. No updates from the utility company. Great, I muttered, settling back into the couch. I scrolled aimlessly through social media, hoping the power would flicker back on any minute. That's when I heard it. A faint knock at the front door. So soft, I almost dismissed it as the house settling, or perhaps a branch brushing against the siding. I paused the music playing on my phone and listened intently. Silence. Shrugging it off, I resumed scrolling. Then, 3 sharp knocks echoed through the silent house, each one more insistent than the last. My heart did a somersault. Probably just a late-night delivery mix-up, I tried to reassure myself. Grabbing my flashlight, I made my way to the front door. Peering through the peephole, I was met with nothing. The porch was empty, the street beyond eerily quiet under the pale moonlight. A creeping unease settled over me. I double-checked the deadbolt and even slid the chain lock into place for good measure. I dialed Dave's number, but it went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Alex. Call me when you get this," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Something weird's going on. Knowing Dave, he was probably miles from the nearest cell tower, completely oblivious to my growing anxiety. Back in the living room, the candlelight danced shadows across the walls, morphing familiar shapes into sinister figures. An unsettling feeling washed over me, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. I shook my head, trying to dispel the paranoia. "Get a grip, Alex," I whispered. Deciding some reassurance wouldn't hurt, I did a quick sweep of the house. The kitchen was empty, as was the small guest room Dave used as his gear closet. As I passed by the back door, something caught my eye. Muddy footprints smudged the doormat and led right up to the door itself. Fresh ones. A chill ran down my spine. Someone had been here, maybe still was. My grip tightened around the flashlight, hands slick with sweat. I hurried back to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife from the block. My mind raced. Who would be creeping around at this hour? And why? The thought crossed my mind that it could be teenagers pulling a prank, but the footprints suggested something more sinister. Then the knocking resumed, more aggressive this time. It pounded from the front door, then the back, even rattling the windows. The cacophony echoed through the house, each bang amplifying my fear. This was no prank. Panic surged through me, adrenaline flooding my veins. I felt cornered, like an animal trapped by an unseen predator. Fumbling with my phone, I dialed 911. "911, what's your emergency?" A calm voice answered. "Someone's trying to break into my house," I blurted out, my voice trembling. "What's your address?" she asked. I rattled it off, glancing nervously around as the knocking persisted. "We have units in your area, but there's a severe storm causing delays. Lock all your doors and stay on the line." A rumble of thunder underscored her words. "Just hurry, please," I pleaded. Minutes stretched agonizingly as the knocks ceased once more, leaving an oppressive silence. "They're gone," I whispered. "Stay vigilant," the operator advised. "Officers are on their way." I decided to hunker down in the kitchen. From there, I had a clear view of both the front and back entrances. The knife never left my hand. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the trees outside sent my nerves into overdrive. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker of movement down the hallway leading to the bedrooms. I turned slowly, muscles tensed. Standing at the far end was a figure shrouded in shadows. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No response. I inched forward, the knife trembling in my grasp. As I got closer, the figure became clearer. My breath caught in my throat. It was me. Same disheveled brown hair, same gray t-shirt and jeans. But there was something off about him, about me. His eyes were vacant, hollow. A sinister smirk curled at the edge of his lips. What do you want?" I stammered. He tilted his head, mirroring my confusion. Before I could react, the lights flickered, just for a second, and then he was gone. Vanished as if he had never been there. I stood there, stunned, questioning my own sanity. A thunderclap jolted me back to reality. The storm was directly overhead now, rain pelting against the windows. Desperate for any sign of the police, I moved back toward the front of the house. That's when a deafening bang rattled the front door, followed by the sound of splintering wood. Fueled by a mix of fear and anger, I sprinted to the door and swung it open. And there he was again. Me, but this time drenched in blood. His eyes, wide with terror, locked onto mine. "Help me!" he gasped, reaching out with a trembling hand. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the knife. "This can't be real," I muttered. Before I could process what was happening, a flash of lightning illuminated the figure fully. The wounds on his body were severe. Gashes across the arms, a deep cut on the forehead. Blood pooled at his feet, mingling with the rain. "Who did this to you?" I managed to ask. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he pointed behind me, into the darkness of the house. I turned slowly, dread twisting in my gut. Standing in the shadows was another figure, indistinct but menacing. The air grew colder, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. When I whipped back around, the bloody version of me was gone. The porch was empty save for the puddle of blood that now seemed to be evaporating before my eyes. Sirens wailed in the distance, snapping me out of my stupor. Red and blue lights flashed at the end of the street. Relief washed over me. I stepped outside, waving frantically. 2 officers approached, hands hovering near their holsters. "Sir, are you okay?" one called out. I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely audible over the storm. They guided me to the ambulance that had just arrived. As the paramedics checked my vitals, one of the officers spoke with urgency. "We got a call about an intruder?" I nodded. "There was someone here. He looked just like me. He was injured, bleeding." The officers exchanged glances. "We've searched the perimeter. There's no one else here." I looked back at the house. It stood silent, the windows dark. But I saw him, and there was someone inside too. "Sir, sometimes stress can play tricks on the mind," the paramedic said gently. "Your blood pressure is through the roof. Have you been experiencing any anxiety or lack of sleep?" I wanted to argue, to insist on what I'd seen, but doubt was creeping in. Had it all been a hallucination? "Maybe," I whispered, suddenly feeling exhausted. "We'll take you to the hospital for a full checkup," the paramedic offered. As they loaded me into the ambulance, I caught one last glimpse of the house. For a split second, I thought I saw a shadow move across an upstairs window. I blinked, and it was gone. To this day, I don't know what really happened that night. The official report chalked it up to exhaustion and heat-induced hallucinations. Dave thought it was the result of one too many whiskeys combined with an overactive imagination. But every so often, when I'm alone on a quiet night, I feel that unsettling sensation of being watched. And I wonder if somewhere out there, a part of me is still trapped in that house, waiting. I slammed the car door, my heart hammering in my chest as Mark's shadowy figure emerged from the dark woods. His eyes glowed unnaturally in the dim light. "You can't escape me, Sarah," he hissed. My hands shook violently as I fumbled with the keys. The engine sputtered but refused to start. Rain pounded the windshield, and I felt like I was drowning. I had to get away. Just a few hours earlier, I was wiping down tables at the diner, eager to end my shift. "See you tomorrow, Sarah," my coworker Jenny had called out, her cheery voice a stark contrast to the gloomy weather outside. If only I'd known what the night had in store. Stepping into the pouring rain, I regretted not bringing an umbrella. The small town of Willow Creek was eerily quiet, the streets shimmering under flickering streetlights. I hurried to my old sedan, longing for the warmth of my tiny apartment and maybe a hot cup of tea. Driving down the empty highway, the rain intensified. My wipers struggled against the deluge, and visibility was near zero. The radio played softly, some old love song that felt out of place on such a bleak night. That's when I saw him. A lone figure on the roadside, drenched, hood up, thumb barely raised. Common sense screamed at me to keep driving. My mother had always warned me about picking up strangers. But there was something about him. Maybe it was the loneliness that comes with living in a small town where everyone knows everyone. Maybe I just didn't want to feel alone. I rolled down the window slightly. "Need a ride?" I called out, trying to sound casual. He looked up, water streaming down his pale face. "If it's not too much trouble," he replied softly. He climbed in, bringing a chill with him that had nothing to do with the weather. "I'm Mark," he said, pulling back his hood to reveal sharp features and piercing blue eyes. There was something almost timeless about his appearance. "Sarah," I introduced myself, forcing a smile. "Where are you headed?" He glanced at me. "Just up the road," he said vaguely. "I'll let you know when to stop." A little odd, but I didn't press. Maybe he was passing through or had car trouble of his own. Silence filled the car, broken only by the rhythmic thump of the wipers. I tried making small talk, asked about the weather, if he was from around here. But his responses were curt. He seemed lost in thought, staring into the rain. Then he started humming, a haunting melody that sent a shiver down my spine. It was beautiful yet unsettling. "What's that song?" I asked. He stopped abruptly. "What song?" he replied, eyes fixed ahead. His unease settled in. I caught him glancing at me from the corner of his eye, but whenever I turned, he was staring out the window. The air grew thick with tension. We passed a gas station bathed in the warm glow of neon lights. An idea struck. "Mind if we stop? I need gas," I lied, hoping to part ways sooner rather than later. "No need," he said sharply. "Just keep going." His tone was icy, and my grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Do you believe in fate?" he asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "I haven't thought about it much," I admitted. He smirked. "Maybe you should." My instincts screamed that something was off. "Where did you say you were headed again?" I probed. He chuckled softly. I didn't. Anxiety gnawed at me. I decided to take the next exit, hoping to find a crowded place. As I signaled, he noticed. "Stay on this road," he commanded. A knot formed in my stomach. "Look, I need to stop," I insisted. His eyes met mine, cold and unblinking. "No, you don't." Fear prickled at the back of my neck. My car suddenly began to sputter. The headlights flickered, and the engine died. "What the hell?" I muttered, pulling over. "Car trouble?" Mark asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. I grabbed my phone. No signal, of course. "Great," I whispered. "What's wrong?" he asked, though he didn't sound concerned. "No reception," I said. "I'll check under the hood." I stepped out into the rain, the cold seeping through my clothes. Lifting the hood, I pretended to look for the problem, though I had no idea what I was doing. I just needed a moment to think. I heard the passenger door open. Mark stood beside me, too close. "Need help?" he offered. "No, I've got it," I replied quickly, my pulse quickening. He leaned in, his face inches from mine. "You seem nervous, Sarah." His breath was warm against the cold night air. "I'm fine," I lied, stepping back. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Out here all alone, anything could happen. My heart raced. "I think we should wait for help," I said, moving toward the driver's side. He grabbed my arm, his grip firm. "I don't think help is coming," he whispered. Panic surged. "Let go of me!" I demanded, trying to sound brave. His eyes darkened. "Why did you stop for me?" he asked. "I wanted to help," I stammered. "Maybe you shouldn't have," he said, his voice low. I yanked my arm free and bolted into the woods, adrenaline fueling my legs. Branches whipped my face, but I didn't stop. Behind me, I could hear him chasing. "Sarah!" he called out, his voice unnaturally loud. "You can't run forever!" I ignored him, focusing on the path ahead, or lack thereof. The forest was dense, and the rain made the ground slippery. I tripped over a root, crashing to the ground. Pain shot through my ankle. I scrambled up, limping forward as tears blurred my vision. Ahead, a faint light glowed. A house? Salvation? I pushed toward it, hope igniting. But as I drew closer, I realized it was just a lantern hanging from a tree. A cruel trick. I collapsed beside it, gasping for breath. Footsteps approached slowly. "You should have stayed in the car," Mark taunted. I grabbed the lantern, swinging it wildly as he approached. "Stay back!" I screamed. He laughed, a chilling sound. "Feisty, I like that." The lantern slipped from my grasp, shattering on the ground. Flames licked up, momentarily separating us. He glared at me through the fire. Taking the chance, I turned and ran deeper into the woods. My ankle protested with each step, but fear pushed me onward. I burst into a clearing, only to find a small, abandoned cabin. I hesitated, but heard his pursuit behind me. I darted inside, slamming the door and barricading it with a rotting chair. The cabin was musty, cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. I searched frantically for a weapon, finding a rusted knife on an old table. The door rattled. "You can't hide, Sarah," Mark's voice sang. I gripped the knife tightly, backing away as the door began to give. He burst in, eyes wild. "This has been fun," he sneered. "But all games end." "Stay away!" I yelled, holding up the knife. He lunged. I slashed out, the blade slicing his arm. To my horror, black liquid oozed instead of blood. He looked at it, then back at me, grinning. "You're not human," I whispered, terror gripping me. "Perceptive," he mocked, but too late. He advanced, and I stumbled back, tripping over debris. Desperate, I grabbed a broken piece of wood and hurled it at a window. The glass shattered, and I climbed through, cutting myself but ignoring the pain. I ran toward the faint sound of traffic, my lungs burning. Bursting onto a highway, a truck screeched to a halt. "Help me!" I cried. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, pulled me in. "What happened?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Please, just go," I begged. As we sped off, I looked back to see Mark standing on the roadside, his figure fading into the darkness. His eyes still glowed, but he made no move to follow. Later, I told the police everything. They searched the area but found no trace of him or the cabin. They said there was nothing out there but trees. Maybe they thought I was crazy. Sometimes I wonder if they're right. Back at home, I tried to return to normal life, but the nightmares won't stop. Every time I close my eyes, I see his face, hear his haunting melody. The scars on my ankle and hands are the only proof that any of it was real. I've learned my lesson. No matter how lonely the road gets, I'll never pick up a hitchhiker again.